Are you trying to determine what the best shoe fit for you is, and you're not quite sure whether you pronate, you supinate, or maybe you have a neutral foot and you're not sure how to get that information? I'm setting up a 3-part series. This is one of those videos. In this video, I'm specifically going to go over supination. And what I'm going to discuss is what supination is, what shoes you should be purchasing, what shoes you typically like to buy, and the benefits of buying a specific type of shoe. Now, I will not get into specific brands, so I apologize if you're looking for which brands are best for supination. I actually tend to think that all brands will help you, will service supination. You just have to know what you're looking for and what it is that you would like to buy. So you don't necessarily have to change the brand that you already use. You just might need to do a little bit of research to figure out which shoes, which one of their shoes will work best for you. So let's get right into it. What is supination? Supination is a fancy word that describes how your foot hits the ground. And what it tells you is that the outside of your foot tends to be where you make contact and keep contact. So this is what I mean by that. So I have my little trusty skeleton foot. So you have the inside arch, just for orientation. This would be a right foot. So you have your great toe, the inside arch, and then you have your pinky toe and the outside bones. Now, if you supinate, when you hit the ground, you have a tendency to hit on the outside and then stay for a really long time on the outside. If you ever do actually come over, you've just extended your time on the outside of that foot before you advance forward. Now, some people, when they supinate, they really just only stay on the outside of that foot. They never come in. And what that ends up meaning for the person who supinates is that there is very little shock absorption when you hit the ground. The shock absorption comes from the arch support. Your foot naturally comes with an ability to absorb the impact of your body hitting the ground, and that is your arch support, or that is your arch. So if you never come in, then you're never actually utilizing the support that's naturally embedded in your foot. And there could be lots of reasons for that. I'm not trying to correct that in this video, just trying to educate you on how to maybe buy a shoe that will help alleviate some of the stresses of the impact. Especially if you're trying to run, you don't want to just be pounding the ground. And in case you're curious what a normal walking pattern would be, is you should hit on the outside of your heel. You should come along that pinky toe, and then you should swivel over to where you push off. So again, it should be kind of this natural. And when you supinate, you just sort of hang out too long on that outside. Exaggerating because this is, not the easiest thing to move, but hopefully you get the point. Now, if you're not 100% sure how you walk, which is not shocking, it is very hard to figure out how it is that you walk without having somebody watch you, and sometimes that's even complicated. So you can do a little sleuthing. I have a shoe. So if you look, you can see how this person hits the outside. You see all that wear? There's like very little tread. And then up here, they do come over. There is some wear, but you can tell it's way more on this side than it is on this side. At least on this side, you can see some of the tread. Very little tread over here. And this person has a tendency to supinate. And to that point, they buy shoes that are very rigid. It's good that it only bends at its toe box, because it's really odd when it bends in the middle of the shoe. But this is a very rigid shoe. There's very little movement that's happening, and that goes along with the idea that you buy things naturally that correlate with your own body. And when you have a foot that supinates, it tends to be a very rigid foot structure. There's not a lot of bending. Maybe your ankles are stiff. Your whole foot is stiff and rigid. And that is one reason that you end up using that supination as a pattern of walking. That is all fine, and many people supinate for their whole life and they never have a problem. If you're trying to run, however, it is advantageous to absorb as much impact as possible so that you don't injure your knees, you don't injure your hips, you don't injure your lower back. Obviously, you also don't want to injure your foot, but if it's the one that's rigid, maybe that doesn't happen as often. So what would be ideal for a supinator? Something that does absorb the impact. So you would want to buy a slightly cushier shoe than perhaps you have in the past. There are shoes that are designed, and again, as I said earlier, there are shoes that are entirely designed to help supination. That market is not as big as pronation control, but there still are shoe makers and shoe designs that help you improve supination. And really what it ends up doing is it builds up the outside of the shoe so that you're forced to roll your foot in. And so the way that the shoe is designed, it makes you bias your foot inward, allowing you to use more of the arch without having to necessarily think about it, because your foot's just sort of forced into it. And so those are kind of the nuts and bolts of what happens when your foot does supinate, the benefits of having a shock absorbing shoe since your foot is not absorbing that shock. Other things to consider when you're buying sneakers. Again, it doesn't matter what brand, you just want to make sure that the shoe fits your foot. Now, some people have a tendency to have higher arches, lower arches. They have a wider toe box, narrower toe box. You just find a maker that makes a shoe that works best for you and that you can tie properly. When you're running specifically, doesn't matter what you do with the rest of the time when you're wearing your shoes, when you're running, you want to make sure that you actually fully lace up those shoes. You might not need to get to the top, like 2 small holes, but you do want to fully lace up your shoes. And then when you're done running, you want to unlace them and pull them off. You don't want to use that heel, like taking one shoe and sliding it off without untying it, because you end up compromising the amount of support that you're going to get from that shoe. To that end, all of these amazing shoemakers have come up with technology that allows the arch support or the insoles of the shoe to reinflate after you're not in them for a while. So typically overnight. So you wear them all day, as long as it's not too extreme, and then overnight it reinflates. Now when you're running, the amount of impact on that shoe is a little different than if you're just walking around. So they really do suggest about 24 hours worth of time to recoil from a run, especially if you're getting into that 5+ mile range daily. So what you want to do is, if you find a pair of shoes that you like, buy 2, and that way you can alternate them. You still want to get rid of those shoes or transition them not to being your running shoes. Maybe they're just your everyday shoes after about 500 miles. And the reason being, the same thing I'm talking about, is that ability for the inserts to reinflate, to give you back the original support that you were looking for, takes time. But as you put those 500+ miles on them, that ability of the insert to get back its support has lessened, and it's not as effective. So again, in an ideal situation, what you want is as close to 500 miles. You want to replace those shoes for running. Now, I personally keep them for just walking around, doing yard work, whatever, so that I'm not just getting rid of shoes after 500 miles, which, depending on what kind of race you're training for, doesn't take very long for you to get to. But just in terms of globally, for the best quality for those shoes, that's what you're looking for. The last thing to check for is the actual shoe size. Now, I have met people that really like to have their toes crammed into a shoe. They don't feel like they're getting the proper support from a shoe if their toes are not actually bent. This is not what you want, especially while running. You can lose toenails. You actually change how effective your foot is at grabbing the ground. All these things. It's just not good for you to put your foot into a shoe having it be so tight that your toes actually don't have room to be flat and a little bit splayed out. And so if you're trying on a pair of sneakers, especially that you're trying to run with, you want to make sure that you have a full width of your thumb between your longest toe, right? So whether that's your big toe or the second toe, whatever toe it is, the longest toe it is, you want to make sure that there is enough space between the end of your shoe and your toe. Now, if you're going on longer runs in like 5 miles, if you're going to be doing marathons, then you want a little bit more room in there, because as you run, your foot will swell. And any running store will even suggest that you buy half a shoe size larger than you would normally, just to allow for the swelling and your foot to stretch out a bit while you're running. Because you don't want to get where, again, you don't have any sensation or you have other things that are just causing you to be uncomfortable while you're running. So you want to have that little bit of room. But I would say if you're just running 5 miles or so, that there's no reason to go a whole size up. It's not enough miles to cause you a problem. But those are the things to look into. So just a short recap. When you supinate, you have a very rigid, structured foot, and you tend to not have a whole lot of natural shock absorption with the way that you're hitting the ground. So what you want to do is you want to purchase a shoe that will give you that added support and help you with shock absorption to reduce the injuries to your knees, your hips, and your low back. Second, you want to make sure that you tie the shoe as it is supposed to be tied. Try not to just pull it off out of simplicity, because that just stretches out the shoe and does not give you the support that you need while you're running. You want to give your shoe a full 24 hours to recover from the run. So possibly buying 2 pairs of shoes to help you alternate. And you want to make sure that there's enough room in your shoe to allow for your toe to jet forward. If you avoid that little spacing in there, every time you stop, your toe will just hit the front of your shoe. Forgot to mention that, apologize. That's why it's important to buy shoes with enough impact and not have them already be crunched, because then every time you stop or you're decelerating, your toes just hit the front of your shoe, which isn't good for your feet. It also, if you're going to be doing long extended runs closer to marathon lengths and you're going to be training for that, you really do want to go up about half a size in your normal shoe, use your normal shoe size. So I hope that you find this information helpful. And if you're looking for more information or information about another type of the way that your foot hits the ground, check out the other 2 videos, one for pronation and one for a neutral foot. Have a great day.